Welcome to Forbes Entertainment. Joining me now is Rob LaFranco, Assistant Managing Editor here at Forbes. Rob, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Brittany. Great to be back.
So, Rob, I want to follow up on a story that we've been tracking, and that's Bob Iger coming back to reclaim his title as CEO of Disney. His first time in this position this week, he held a town hall. Can you tell us any news that came out of that?
Oh, there was quite a bit of news coming out of that, and it was basically he's trying to calm the waters of a ship that is on some pretty stormy seas at the moment.
So there is a hiring freeze still in effect, and there were rumors that he was going to merge with Apple or acquire something. He is king of the acquisitions in the past. He made a few large-scale ones when he was first Disney CEO, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, things of that nature, 21st Century Fox, how could I forget? But now they're not going to do any acquisitions. So do you think that hindsight's 2020, but looking back, were these acquisitions before good ideas?
Oh, brilliant ideas, at least the first three. I mean, look at what they've gotten out of Marvel, look at what they've gotten out of Pixar, and look what they've gotten out of Star Wars, so Lucasfilm. You know, you can argue whether 21st Century Fox was a good deal. $71 billion is a lot of money. The company's saddled with debt. It's an expensive acquisition to digest. But they wouldn't have Avatar without purchasing 21st Century Fox. So, you know, his purchases from the past were very shrewd in this. I mean, you know, buying Lucasfilm for $4 billion and, you know, $5 billion, I think it was from Marvel, something around that. They've gotten well over that in returns. You know, Fox is a little tougher to digest, but you know, the idea of Apple buying Disney, it's a fun one to think about as a business journalist. Nobody really takes it seriously, and certainly if he was considering it, and Tim Cook and him are talking, and they do know one another, he certainly would downplay it.
But acquisitions were his big move. So since he announced that he's not doing those, what other tricks do you think he has up his sleeve?
Well, that's the big question. You know, what is there out there to buy? It's clear. Look, after they've gotten 21st Century Fox, I don't know that there's much left in the kitty to play around with right now without really putting the company up against the wall. I think what he has to do, and this is what Bob Chapek didn't seem to do effectively, is to bring that sense of content creation, to get all of the disparate parts of Disney working in unison. I mean, that's Disney's great strength. That's what happened under Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg when there was the Disney Renaissance of the 1990s. You know, they put an animation movie together, put it out, get it into the theme parks, get it out to consumer products, and it was all seamless. Put it onto the ships, you know, it was all seamlessly working to drive profits. And I don't know what Bob Chapek was doing, but content creation, he wasn't a warm and fuzzy content type of guy, and Bob Iger is. So I don't think he needs to make acquisitions. They've got plenty of really good IP. He just has to find a way to pull the value out of all of that IP.
He definitely needs to tap into the arsenal there. But he's fresh on the job again, almost a week in. What do you think is the most immediate challenge that he faces?
I think, going back to calming the waters, I think, you know, Disney has always, its reputation is that it's a very, very difficult place to work. It's very political, there's backstabbing, it's an intense place. That's always been the reputation at Disney.
Is Bob Iger's reputation similar to that?
No, he's, you know, there are always these executives in Disney's past. Michael Eisner has that reputation, but his cohort was Frank Wells, and everyone loved Frank Wells. Bob Iger's more in the Frank Wells category. Everybody seems to love Bob Iger. He's very charismatic, he's very political, he's very diplomatic.
And was Bob Chapek in the other category?
I don't know that he would be considered as abrasive as some of their past leaders, but he was just not a content guy. He was an accounting type guy. It just doesn't work in Hollywood. There's a chemistry there that just has to work. And I think that's what Bob Iger has to do. He has to calm people down. You know, they haven't announced layoffs. That would certainly freak people out. Mm-hmm. Hiring freeze. People who like working for Bob Iger can now sort of settle in and say, all right, let's give this a year. Let's give this 18 months. We're working on this new film. You know, he's going to support that. And I think he needs to bring calm back into the Magic Kingdom.
And just in general, as an employee, you hear hiring freeze. Does that automatically mean layoffs are impending?
It throws up a warning flag, and the talk of recession, and look, these media companies and the tech companies, they're spending billions and billions of dollars on new content. If they decide to turn that spigot off because the returns aren't there, the value isn't there from the streaming services that they've invested so much money in, well, they're going to have to cut back on something. And when you're spending that much money on content, that's an obvious place to cut back on. One thing we know they're not cutting back on is sports rights. But that's money out the door to drive viewership. And that's a proven successful strategy. And it seems to be that they're going to spend a lot of money on sports content that came out today. So it would be worrisome for the troops at Disney if suddenly there was a turn off of the spigot of content spending, and it's possible.
Can you talk more about the sports strategy that just came out?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know much about it except that they're going to compete with Amazon, with Apple. There's all of the streaming services, or many of the streaming services, are getting into the live sports business. Amazon has Thursday Night Football now. They show baseball games. So, it's viewership is moving in that direction. Mm-hmm. We've moved away from broadcast. We're moving away from cable. We're going straight into the streaming world. And more that's going to become event television. And so it makes sense to spend that kind of money.
I want to shift gears now to Balenciaga, which has really found itself in really hot water this week. Can you tell us about the scandal?
Yeah, that was one that was really hard to digest. I really don't know what they were thinking on that one. I mean, they did hire a number of years ago a very controversial figure who was sort of off-brand. Balenciaga is very elitist, very high-end, and Dema, the designer that they brought on board, was more of a street sort of ethos. But this one was a little odd because they were mixing children with sexual fetishes, and I don't care how edgy you are. It's just
no one's gonna like that.
Not a good move.
I do want to talk about Kim Kardashian, who is involved in this. She has made the brand a centerpiece of her wardrobe. She has also been featured in its campaigns and even walked in a fashion show. So how did she respond to this disaster?
Yeah, well, and she's another one who walks that fine line between elitism and popular culture. She's kind of in both worlds. I mean, she was immediate about it, saying this is unacceptable. She's a mother, it's it's really not hard to battle this one back or to speak out against it. And she did speak out against it. She's questioning her relationship with the brand. So it's a big deal. She's their highest profile sponsor.
Do you think that response was sufficient? Do you think she should have came out harder against Balenciaga?
No. I mean, they immediately came out and were like, oops, sorry, folks. We really shouldn't have done this. So, and that's what you have to do. There's a point at which you need to go, there's no defense of this. And they didn't try to do a defense. Though they did come out a little bit later and, there were two elements of it. There was the handbags with the BDSM imagery, and then there was this the shot of the U.S. Supreme Court case again about child pornography. They quickly turned that against an outside production company, started pointing fingers, and sued them for $25 million. I doubt that goes anywhere, but it's just an indication that they realized just how bad this was, and they're trying to kind of get some of the blame off.
How bad is this, would you say, overall for Balenciaga? Is there any coming back?
Oh, sure. I don't think there's any falling. I mean, the stock of carrying the parent company hasn't taken a hit at all. Of course, they have many, many luxury brands, so just one going off is not going to really destroy the company. The stock's actually up since this happened. So, and look, we've seen these things before. If you remember I think it was the Pepsi commercial with Kendall Jenner where, it was during the Black Lives Matter protests, and then there was this sort of goofy shot of her with a Pepsi can, as George Floyd has been killed and she's enjoying her Pepsi. There's just things you don't do. But who remembers that commercial? You have to read about it or think, oh yeah, I gotta remember that. What a fiasco that was. People are still drinking Pepsi.
So more broadly, aside from Pepsi, how can brands bounce back from such controversial moments?
I think they do immediately what Balenciaga did. Yeah, our
Like crisis
mistake.
control.
Our
Yeah.
mistake. This was terrible. We understand where it went wrong. Blah blah blah. And then I think you really need to sit down and get into your marketing war room, your branding war room. Do whatever sort of tests you need to do, and find out a way to come out with something memorable that puts this into the past. That makes people identify you now with something other than scandal. It can happen, and it can, especially with popular brands. Now remember, Balenciaga. The people who are buying it are people who may not really care about this. You're talking about very wealthy people, very affluent people, and they may be savvy enough to realize, yeah, that was really a dumb idea, but I really want that bag.
I see that point. Do you think that it would be a different story if it was an everyday brand versus this luxury brand?
It's certainly a different calculus for the brand. Again, we'll go back to Pepsi. That is an everyday brand, and they quickly came out. They quickly yanked that ad.
Yeah.
We've seen. If you remember back to the edgy Benetton ads back in, I think it was the '90s, and they weren't controversial. They were just edgy, and people they took to that. They really loved that. But of course, Benetton just really is not the company it used to be. So, there's bouncing back for sure. And doesn't matter what kind of brand you are, whether you're a high-end, you have to make sure you have smart people in place who know how to react to this. Let's hope that they do.
Exactly. And there is more Kardashian news this week. Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, have agreed to a divorce settlement earlier this week. When Kardashian filed for divorce back in February 2021, both had combined assets worth $2.1 billion. At the time, West was richer. That has since shifted. So can you give us a glimpse into Kanye's wealth right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fraction of what it was. We peg it at about $400 million, which is essentially the fortune he had minus the Adidas royalties, which were in the realm of $200 million plus per year, at least the last couple of years. It was escalating, so it was rising. It's he still owns 5% of her company, Skims. So the divorce stipulates how much money he needs to spend to take care of the children who will be in her custody. It's something $2.5 million a year. He can cover that. I mean, he was, Donda aside, one of the top musicians in the world. He still streams millions of times a year. He's got publishing royalties. He's probably pulling in $10 million in every year from publishing and royalties. He's got producing credits across the hip hop industry. So, he's got cash flow coming in. He can afford this. But he is not likely to work his way back to billionaire status without doing something like Balenciaga is doing, which is step back, apologize, figure out how we get out of this mess. Kanye just seems to be digging deeper into the mess. So.
Exactly. He was just at dinner with a white nationalist, Nick Fuentes. So he just, I think, is entrenched in this scandal, and there's no coming back anytime soon, it appears. But their fortunes did flip. Forbes did report that Kim Kardashian officially became a billionaire in April 2021. But their proposed settlement, West has agreed to pay $200,000 per month in child support. Do you think this will ever be changed because now she is making more money than him?
No, because I think they had a prenuptial agreement. These were two wealthy people, famous people coming together, and those are contracts. And they had a contract, and they're living up to that contract. I think as long as she has custody, he's going to have to pay. And I think the court rightly assessed he has the resources to pay this. And if he suddenly his cash flow dried up, suddenly everyone stopped listening to Kanye West for some strange reason, which is not likely to happen, and he's not collecting royalties or publishing mechanicals on anything, he can always sell the 5% back to her and take care of it that way.
True, good point. Now I do want to switch to music, the top music of 2022. Pandora and Apple Music have released their lists of the top music. Who's on it?
Bad Bunny is all over the place. The kid is crushing it. Yes, this was a list. It comes out every year. The good news on this is that despite all of the reporting we're doing on all of these dinosaur acts who are selling off their legacy music for fortunes, people are listening to the new acts. It's Harry Styles, it's Olivia Rodrigo, it's Bad Bunny. So there's a lot of fresh music out there that is turning people on, which is great.
Any surprises on the list?
what surprised me was who wasn't on the list, which is Taylor Swift.
That surprised me too.
And looking at it, there was Spotify doesn't seem to be a place where Bad Bunny is thriving as well as on Pandora and Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because Latin music fans don't go to Spotify as much as maybe they go to Apple and Pandora? I don't know. That was a curiosity. Swifties, they may be more download people rather than stream. They want to own a piece of Taylor. I don't know, but it was considering her performance over the past 2 years, the re-releases that were number one hits, the top 10 of top 10 just recently. Like, it's just surprising to me that she's not on there. But that was the biggest drop for me.
Well, Spotify did do their Wrapped recently, so maybe we'll see some Taylor news or data coming out of that. But how did last year's list compare to this year's?
It was pretty similar, just different names. Bad Bunny was on it last year. He was more prevalent this year. Obviously, he had a bigger year. Harry Styles. It's there are Ed Sheeran. These are the top acts of today, and we're not going to see much change from year to year on that sort of thing. The lists were pretty similar. Again, just a few different names on it.
Well, on to movie news now, starting with Top Gun Maverick. It's being re-released December 2nd to December 15th. So is this announcement surprising, considering it just came out over the summer?
Nothing in the Hollywood distribution strategy is surprising anymore. 5 years ago, this would have been surprising because everything was so entrenched in how movies made it to the public. This doesn't surprise me. I mean, look, Hollywood is grappling for a direction here, and Top Gun Maverick was by far the dominant success story of the year. Not the biggest movie of the year, that goes to Doctor Strange, but it's by far the biggest success that everybody talks about. And so it makes sense for them to cling on to this theatrical run that it's having and try and boost it, because nothing drives attention to a movie more than being at the theaters. You can put all the posters you want on the subways and the billboards. A big theatrical hit is always going to drive attention. They're now looking forward to putting this into a streaming service. It's already dominated the box office news for this year. This can only help.
Do you think that it's too soon
To go back? No, again, the rules are completely rewritten. So again, 5 years ago, what are they doing? But now, it's not too soon because nobody really knows how all of this shakes out.
Yeah, it could do well, and I know that there were some repeat viewers. My uncle saw it a few times, but it is going to Paramount Plus at the end of December. Do you think that this is a big enough draw, Top Gun Maverick specifically, to get people to subscribe?
Personally, I don't. I mean, if you look at Disney Plus, which was new and really got a boost from putting Hamilton on there, but there were so many people who never got to see Hamilton. Even people who lived in New York where it was running. People all over the country, all over the world who never saw Hamilton, and it was the biggest thing.
That was my first time seeing Hamilton, yeah.
That was my first time, and I've watched it 6 times probably since then. It's great.
Yeah.
So Top Gun it's a different scenario where everyone in the world has had access to it, except in China, to see Top Gun Maverick. And so I don't know if it's going to be enough to drive people to Paramount. It certainly wouldn't be enough to keep them there. And that streaming service could use a lot of help. So I'm not sure that this is the saving grace. It won't hurt.
But it might not help.
It might not help that much.
I do want to talk about the box office generally. So what have been the winners and losers at the box office recently?
Well, Wakanda is still crushing it. I mean, that one doesn't seem to be going away. But again, the competition has not been that great. So it's really looking at can it hold its own against Avatar, which is coming out soon. Certainly Avatar is going to dominate the box office when it comes. Will Wakanda keep drawing people in? It's very possible. It's got great reviews, and it's a great sequel. But, when you're up against movies that, quite frankly, just bomb, like She Said, the Harvey Weinstein story, and the latest Disney animation movie, it's not hard to stay number one.
Do you think Avatar is the only thing that could potentially kneecap Wakanda Forever?
It's certainly looking that way, and the buzz on Avatar which isn't really from the ground up. It's kind of from the top down. I mean, they're really pushing the trailers and the promotion and the effects, and Fox and Cameron are they need to make a lot of money on this film for it to pay off. So they're creating the buzz.
Got it. But something that didn't, I guess the buzz wasn't there, was Strange World, and the Wrap said, quote, "It's turning out to be one of the biggest bombs in the history of the famed animation studio. Strange World is animated, but it had an all-star cast: Jake Gyllenhaal, Gabrielle Union, Dennis Quaid, Lucy Liu. So where did it go wrong?"
It's a good question. Disney, it's hard to say whether it was the story or the animation itself. It's hard to say on that one. Disney, for all of its authority in the animation world, has had bombs in the past. I mean, Sleeping Beauty was a bomb back in the 50s. Fantasia was a bomb twice. It came out in the 40s, I think it was, and the Fantasia 2000 came out. Terrible. Treasure Island was another one. But animation kind of goes in cycles. So if you're looking at something like Sleeping Beauty, for example, it was sort of the culmination, the apex of sort of the early Walt Disney animation years, and they spent a lot of money on it. It was a state of the art. Didn't do well. Of course, it's a classic now, right? And then there was that Katzenberg revival in the 90s, and on the heels of that is when Fantasia 2000 came out, which is more of a traditional animation type thing. It flopped. Why? Well, Pixar had stolen the energy at that point. Everyone wanted digital animation. And so we may be in a transition point with animation where Disney needs to find a new drug. But this could also just be a blip. They have had animation bombs in the past, and this is just another unfortunate one.
Yeah, and Variety even reported that the movie's expected to lose $100 million in its theatrical run. So do you think that it going to a streamer could potentially save it, or is this just a loss?
No, I think they pretty much have written this asset off. I mean, bombs went to DVD in the past, and went to all cable television. It'll generate some. The losses will be mitigated to some extent. It's probably a movie kids will want to watch on airplanes. But no, it's a money loser. There's no way to fix that.
Got it. One movie that did come out, it got a limited theatrical release, Glass Onion, and CNBC reported that the movie likely made $13 to $15 million, and, quote, "Box office analysts predicted the film could have hauled in more than $200 million in ticket sales before the end of its run if it had been given a wider global release." So and it was only out for 5 days. So why did Netflix choose this limited window?
Yeah, this is another good question, and it goes back to the rules are being rewritten and no one really knows what the right recipe is. Netflix, even though it owns a theater and it's in the business of putting movies in the theaters, pretty much just to get Oscar nominations or wins, their business is to pull in subscribers and get them to pay as much per month and not leave for their streaming service. So on the surface, it makes sense. And will it pay off in the end? Will it, if you haven't seen it in the theaters because it wasn't there, will you keep your Netflix subscription for another couple of years? You might. Hard to say.
Do you think this was a mistake on Netflix's part to pull it early, or do you think that they should have simultaneously had it in theaters and also offered it on streaming a month later?
I mean, and that strategy has worked, and it worked during the pandemic, and it worked shortly after when people maybe were a little afraid to go to theater. Day and date was kind of working. I think they could have pulled it off if they had just left it in the theaters and put it and just see where it works best. I mean, what's the harm? I guess. I mean, they may have better I'm sure they have better access to the numbers than I do. But if it's in the theaters, but you prefer not to go to the theater and you're a Netflix subscriber, well, you don't lose any money as Netflix by that person not going to the theater. You will lose the person who goes, oh, well, I don't have to go to the theater because I can watch it at home. But then you're still keeping that customer. You're still keeping that subscriber. So this one was a little hard to understand as well.
I agree. It seems like the theme of this movie talk is throwing strategy at the wall, seeing what sticks. That one doesn't seem like the best strategy. But Rob LaFranco, thank you so much for coming on and breaking it down.
Always good to be here.